She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your mailbox is illegal, and I'll keep running it over until you fix it." That was it, the line that flipped my life upside down. Imagine hearing that from the woman who ran our HOA standing in my driveway with that smug little grin, admitting she'd been the one flattening my mailbox like a demolition derby. 3 times in 1 month my mailbox had been destroyed, and now the culprit wasn't a mystery anymore. It was Karen Monroe Cedar Glen's self-appointed queen who thought her SUV and her clipboard gave her the right to terrorize the neighborhood. At first I told myself it had to be a mistake. The first time maybe a delivery truck clipped it, the second time bad luck. But by the third, when I found twisted metal scattered across my lawn and letters shredded like confetti, I knew something darker was going on. That's when the pink HOA violation slip showed up, fluttering on my porch like a bad joke. Non-compliant mailbox, immediate replacement required. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Karen had crushed my property with her bumper, then fined me for it. Abuse of power doesn't even begin to cover it. I called her. I should have known better. She answered with that syrupy voice sharp underneath like a knife. Your mailbox was oversized, wrong finish, non-compliant. I snapped back. You mean the one you rammed with your SUV 3 times? Mrs. Harris saw you. She actually laughed. If it had been in compliance, maybe it wouldn't have been in the way. I reminded her that destroying a mailbox is a federal offense. She hung up on me, and in that click something inside me cracked. But I wasn't ready to fight, not yet. I sat in my kitchen staring at the pile of fines stacking up. 1 for my mailbox, 1 for my trash can being visible from the curb, 1 for unapproved garden lights. My neighbors started looking at me differently, whispering that I was picking fights with the HOA. I felt isolated, branded as the troublemaker. Nights went sleepless. I wondered if I'd made a mistake buying here. Maybe I should just sell pack up and get away from this insanity. One evening I was outside with a beer staring at the wreckage when Frank Dalton from across the street wandered over. Retired Marine built like a wall, always carried himself like he was still on duty. He glanced at the mess and simply asked, "Karen?" I nodded. He spat into the grass. "Figures. She's been gunning for you since the garden lights thing last year. She doesn't like anyone who pushes back." I kicked a shard of metal, sighed. She picked the wrong guy this time. Frank grinned. Good. About time someone gave her hell. That night, instead of giving up, I dug into the HOA covenant. 123 pages of fine print misery, and buried in section 14.2 was gold. Written notice must be physically delivered. Homeowners get 14 days to cure before enforcement. Karen hadn't given me anything but pink slips taped after the fact. She'd violated her own rules. Then I went federal. Title 18. U.S. Code Section 1705. Destroying a mailbox is a felony punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Suddenly the power balance wasn't all on her side. But I knew rules and laws weren't enough. People like Karen don't fold when you wave a statute in their face. They double down. If I wanted to win, I needed more than legal jargon. I needed a plan. And staring at the mangled heap of my mailbox, the idea struck. If she wanted to smash it, fine. I'd build one she couldn't touch. A fortress. I ordered a Fort Knox mailbox, 1/4-inch steel, 80 pounds of pure defiance, painted forest green with brass numbers, exactly HOA-approved colors. No loopholes, no excuses. I called my buddy Mike, who runs a concrete company, and told him we were building a monument. He laughed. "We'll bury that post so deep it'll be easier to move your house than your mailbox." Perfect. Word spread fast. By Friday morning, half the block was on my lawn to watch. Frank set up his lawn chair with binoculars. Mrs. Harris brought her thermos. The Ruiz family parked on the curb, kids whispering like it was the Super Bowl. Mike and his crew dug 3 feet down, poured concrete thick enough to anchor a skyscraper, and we lowered that fortress into place. Forest green brass numbers polished until they gleamed. HOA compliant on paper, indestructible in reality. When the final bolt clicked, the crowd clapped. Not just for a mailbox, but for what it represented. Defiance. Karen showed up the very next morning, SUV crawling like a predator. Clipboard tape measure heels clicking on the pavement. I watched from my blinds as she measured every angle, checked the bolts, even kicked it with her shoe. Nothing. The steel didn't budge. Her face twisted into a scowl, muttering curses as my hidden camera caught every second. My group chat with neighbors lit up. She just tried to body slam it. Mailbox wins. That afternoon, a maintenance truck rolled up. Two guys looked at the fortress, tapped it with their knuckles, laughed. This thing's solid. Within code, though. They left shaking their heads. Round 2 me. Karen 0. But she wasn't done. That evening she came back with her husband holding a wrench and the head of maintenance in tow. I stepped onto my porch. Evening. Planning to tamper with federal property again. Her husband froze. The maintenance man cleared his throat. It's compliant, Mrs. Monroe. My camera blinked red in the oak tree. Frank shouted from across the street, recording with his phone. Mailbox ain't moving. Lady neighbors laughed, clapped, even cheered as Karen turned red-white, then red again before storming off. For the first time, she looked powerless. The real showdown came at the HOA meeting. Usually 15 retirees sipping burnt coffee, but that night the community center was packed. Word had spread. I stood with my folder of evidence photos, witness statements, highlighted covenants. Karen sat at the head table, smirk plastered on her face. I started. My mailbox was destroyed 3 times. I was fined illegally. Section 14.2 requires written notice and a cure period. I got neither. Federal law makes tampering with a mailbox a felony. And I have witnesses who saw you, Karen, with your SUV. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Harris stood voice steady. I saw her back into it. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. Murmurs spread, heads turned. I pressed harder. This isn't enforcement. This is harassment. Selective, arbitrary, abusive. Look around. How many of you have been fined for tulip shutters, basketball hoops? Hands went up. Voices rose. The room erupted. Karen banged her gavel, shouting for order, but her voice was drowned out by the very people she'd bullied for years. Bill Ortega, the retired lawyer on the board, finally stood. Calm, authoritative. Our covenant was violated. Federal law has been broken. This board cannot ignore it. I recommend dismissal of all fines and a review of the president's conduct. The cheers nearly lifted the roof. The recall vote was swift and brutal, 72-9. Karen was ousted as president of the Cedar Glen HOA. Her face turned chalk white, her gavel cracking against the table one last time as she hissed, "You'll regret this," before storming out, husband trailing behind like a ghost. The neighbors clapped, whistled, shouted, but I didn't smile. Not yet. I stood there, hands on the folder, eyes on the empty chair she'd left behind, knowing the tyrant had finally fallen. And that's how a mailbox toppled a queen. Because here's the truth, bullies don't have power because they're strong. They have it because no one stands up.